Ever wondered what a tuple is in Python and how it differs from a list? Today, we are going to unravel the mystery. In the vast and versatile world of Python, there exists a unique data type known as a tuple. A tuple is essentially a collection of elements similar to a list. However, there's a twist. Tuples are immutable, meaning once you create a tuple, it's locked in. You can't change its contents, nor can you add or remove elements. It's like a time capsule preserving its contents intact. Why would you use such a rigid structure, you may ask? Well, tuples have their own set of advantages. They're faster than lists, and since they're immutable, they make your code safer and more predictable. In the upcoming scenes, we'll explore more about tuples, how to create them, the operations you can perform on them, and how they stand in contrast to lists. So are you ready to dive into the fascinating world of tuples? Stay tuned. First things first, what exactly is a tuple in Python? Well, let's delve right into it. In the world of Python, a tuple is an ordered sequence of elements. It's like a container where you can store different values. However, unlike a grocery bag where you can add, remove, or switch out items, a tuple is more like a time capsule. Once you've placed your items or values inside and sealed it up, you can't change what's inside. That's right, tuples are immutable. Imagine you're crafting a story, and you're setting the stage with characters, a location, a time, and an event. You might say, on a sunny day at the park, a boy named Timmy found a magical stone. In Python, you could capture this entire scene in a tuple. Sunny day, park and Timmy, magical stone. The order matters here, and it's not going to change. That's a tuple for you. One key thing to remember about tuples is that they're immutable. Once you've created a tuple, you can't go back and change one of the elements. So Timmy, the boy in our story, will always find a magical stone on a sunny day at the park. We can't go back and change it to a rainy day or have him find a normal stone instead. That's the beauty and the limitation of tuples. Now, you might be wondering why we'd use tuples if they're so rigid. Well, it's precisely due to this immutability that tuples are incredibly useful. They provide a sort of stability and consistency. If you have data that you want to remain unchanged throughout your code, tuples are your go-to. They're like the bedrock, the foundation that stays firm while everything else might be shifting and changing around them. So there you have it. In Python, a tuple is an ordered, immutable sequence of elements. It's like a list, but unlike a list, its elements cannot be changed once created. It's a reliable, unchangeable sequence that provides consistency in your code. In essence, a tuple is a stable, unchangeable list. Now that we know what a tuple is, how can we create one in Python? Well, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. The syntax for creating tuples in Python is straightforward. We simply need to define our elements and wrap them in parentheses. For instance, if we want to create a tuple with the elements apple, banana, and cherry, we would write it as apple, banana, cherry, and voila, we have a tuple. But what if we want a tuple with a different number of elements? No problem at all. Python is flexible like that. You can create a tuple with just one element or even 50 elements if you wish. For a single element tuple, remember to include a trailing comma after your element like this, apple. This tells Python that it's a tuple, not just a parenthesis around a single object. Now, you might be wondering, why the parenthesis? Well, these parentheses are what make a tuple a tuple. They're like a cozy little home for your elements, keeping them together as a unit. But here's a fun fact. In Python, it's actually the commas that make a tuple, not the parentheses. You can create a tuple without parentheses like this, apple, banana, cherry. But for clarity and good practice, we usually include them. And there you have it. Creating a tuple is as simple as pie. So we've created our tuple. But how can we use it? Well, let's dive right into the various operations we can perform on tuples. First up, accessing elements. Just like in lists, elements in a tuple can be accessed using indexing. Python uses zero-based indexing, which means the first element is at index 0, the second at index 1, and so on. For instance, if we have a tuple named planets containing names of the 8 planets in our solar system, we can access the first planet, Mercury, using planets. Now, what if we want to access a range of elements within a tuple? This is where slicing comes into play. Slicing allows us to access a specific range of tuple elements. For example, planets will give us the second, third, and fourth planets in the tuple. Moving on, let's talk about concatenating tuples. Essentially, concatenation is the process of combining 2 or more tuples to create a new one. It's as simple as adding tuples together using the Tuple operator. For instance, if we have 2 tuples, planets and dwarf_planets, we can create a new tuple, all_planets, by simply doing planets plus dwarf_planets. Next up, let's discuss finding the length of a tuple. The built-in len function offers a straightforward way to do this. Just pass your tuple as the argument to len it, and it will return the number of elements in your tuple. For example, len planets would give us 8, the total number of planets in our solar system. But here's where tuples differ from lists. Unlike lists, tuples do not support item assignment due to their immutability. In simpler terms, this means that once a tuple is created, we cannot change its contents. If you try to reassign a value at a particular index, Python will throw an error. Let's say you have a tuple fruit with elements apple, banana, and cherry. If you try to change apple to avocado by doing fruit = avocado, Python will raise a type error, indicating that tuple object does not support item assignment. So remember, while tuples are similar to lists in many ways, this immutability sets them apart. As you can see, tuples may be immutable, but they are far from inflexible. This unique feature of tuples makes them an essential tool in Python programming, where certain data should remain constant throughout the execution of a program. Tuples, lists, they seem quite similar, don't they? But there are distinct differences. Let's dive into what sets them apart. At first glance, both tuples and lists in Python seem to serve the same purpose. They are both sequences of elements. They can both store any data type, and they are both indexable and iterable, but that's where the similarities end. The first key difference between these two is their mutability. Lists are mutable. This means that you can modify a list after it's been created. You can add elements, remove elements, or change elements. On the other hand, tuples are immutable. Once a tuple is created, you can't change it. You can't add or remove elements, and you can't change an element. This is a crucial distinction that can greatly affect how and when you use them. The second major difference is their usage. Lists are typically used for homogeneous items, meaning items of the same type. For instance, you might use a list to store a collection of numbers or a collection of strings. Tuples, however, are more commonly used for heterogeneous items. You might use a tuple to store a collection of different types of data, like a string, an integer, and a boolean, all in one tuple. The third difference lies in their syntax. When creating a list, you use square brackets, for example, where my underscore list =. But when creating a tuple, you use parentheses like this. My underscore tuple =, 1, 2, 3. In a nutshell, while both tuples and lists offer a way to store multiple items in a single variable, their mutability, typical usage, and syntax set them apart. Tuples are immutable and typically used for heterogeneous data, while lists are mutable and typically used for homogeneous data. So while tuples and lists may appear similar at first glance, they each have their unique quirks and features. We've covered quite a bit today, so how about a quick recap? We kicked off with a solid introduction to Python tuples, defining them as immutable sequences of elements. Each element inside a tuple is called an item. We then dived into how to create tuples, which can be as simple as placing different comma-separated values inside parentheses. Moving on, we explored the various operations we can perform on tuples, from accessing and modifying items to concatenating and deleting tuples. Despite their immutability, we found that tuples are quite flexible and handy in Python programming. Then we compared tuples with lists. While they may seem similar, a key distinction is that tuples are immutable, meaning they cannot be changed after creation, unlike lists. This makes tuples ideal for safeguarding data that should remain constant, and with that we've demystified Python tuples. Remember, practice makes perfect, so keep coding.